All right, welcome to the Reluctant Historian podcast. This is the podcast that I'm making my students do. It's for History 495 this semester. We're going to be going through their research process on how they come up with their paper topics and what they are doing to make sure they don't fail my class. Hopefully you will enjoy these episodes.
Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Reluctant Historian podcast. On our previous episodes, you met our historians, and now today we'll learn a little bit about their research and research methodology. Today we have with us
Powers Todd.
Welcome back, Powers. Now, before we dive into how you conduct your research, how do you go about choosing a topic?
I'd like to look at my area of interest, which is going to be natural history and the way that people interact with the landscape around them. That usually points me to something that I want to do and that I'm like ecstatic to do.
And what area of interest are you focusing on for this upcoming project?
So this project I'm going to be doing the Black Forest in Germany. It is a mountain range that is heavily wooded.
And do you focus on a specific time period or specific event, people in this area?
So I think I'm just going to kind of do an overarching, why are people afraid of it? Like, why does it have such the reputation it has? And I think that's going to span through just about all time periods that people have been in the area.
Do you have prior knowledge of this location already, or is this something that is entirely foreign to you?
The only knowledge I have is very minimal folklore knowledge of it. There are fae and werewolves and sirens, and one of my biggest questions is why are they all next to each other in the same area?
And for those who are maybe unfamiliar with things of that nature, why is that odd?
So sirens are from the Odyssey. They are mythological creatures from the Mediterranean area. Werewolves are more likely to be found in the German area. And then fae are always associated with the Celtics, and which are going to be more towards the British Isles in most folklore.
So, as you've located your area of interest, surely there had to have been contenders. What made you decide on the Black Forest?
So some of my contenders were basically anywhere in Scandinavia that's still protected today, because Scandinavia, to me, has a scarier reputation. The Black Forest was one of my bigger contenders to start off with, and then places like Romania and some of their forests. The thing that knocked out Romania is the fact that I just took a class on it, so I didn't really feel like doing some of the folklore from that area. And then what kind of pushed me away from Scandinavia was the lack of sources I could find whenever I just did a preliminary Google search.
How do you go about narrowing down your research question? I'm sure you want to ask so many different things. Have you developed any specific research questions that revolve around the Black Forest yet, or is that something you're still kind of working on?
I'm still working it out a little bit, but the way that I develop them is to start off with the natural history of the area. So what happened to form that landscape? The mountains came in, the trees are covering it. What type of trees are they? What type of rock is it? How did the mountains form? Since there are a couple different ways that mountains can.
And sort of how it affected the people within that area.
Yeah, and then once the people come in, how did they interact with it? Were they prepared for it, and were they not?
After you've chosen your topic and developed your research questions, what is the next step for you?
So I like to start off with a preliminary dive into databases with what I believe are going to be keywords that would work. However, I am usually incorrect about that, but I try it anyway. After that, it's just like a basic Google search or reading any sources that I did find to see if I can find anything else that might be a good keyword. And if all else fails, then I'll ask ChatGPT for a list of sources, and then I'll quadruple check each source.
And are there any specific sources that you've been attracted to since you've begun your research?
I haven't gone into sources quite yet. However, I did just get a recommendation for Robert Darnton's The Great Cat Massacre.
Do you have any insight on what that might be about just yet? Or were you
No.
attracted to the title?
The title is very interesting to me. I want to know what happens.
How'd you stumble into this book?
It was handed to me about 5 minutes before the podcast started.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you, Mr. Powers Todd. Is there any fun facts or details that you've learned about the Black Forest that you could leave our guests with today?
It is speculated that the Black Forest was the main inspiration for a lot of the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, which I believe could be one of the reasons why it has such a bad reputation.
Fascinating stuff. Well, thank you, Powers, and best of luck on your research.
Thank you.
And for our next guest, we have
Kayla Garza.
Welcome, Caleb. In our discussion today about our research and research methodology, we're a few weeks into the semester. How is your research going?
It's going good. I shifted my original idea that I wrote down for myself. I don't think I turned anything in. And I was originally thinking about studying relationships with countries from the Middle East to the Soviet Union in the 20th century, but now I'm shifting my ideas and I plan on researching Cuba and Cuba's relationship with the Soviet Union, and it kind of ties into Cuba's relationship with the United States in the 20th century instead.
And what's driving this fascination?
I think, to be honest, I've already looked into the Middle East and their relationship with the Soviet Union and the Western world in general, and I have not gone into Latin America as much as I wish I could have. And although this class wants us to focus on a European perspective, I think being able to tie in Latin America and Europe would be this is my best bet with being able to study Latin America, would be tying it into the similar political ideologies that they shared in the 20th century, they being Central America, more specifically Cuba, and the Soviet Union.
Wow, fascinating. Now, before conducting your research, what made you choose this topic?
Previously, we talked about it briefly in a previous episode, but I just was very fascinated with the American culture that was, very popular in the 1960s and 70s, which is very much anti-war protests and all these, I don't know how to say it better, but like alternative political ideologies, and I didn't understand those things. So being able to study what global political relationships were going on in the 20th century is super interesting to me, and I feel like understanding those relationships kind of helps me have a better understanding of what's going on right now. And even if you have any ideas about what we have, what the United States has in relationship with Cuba, what are the tensions there, what does it look like, you can kind of trace it back to the mid-20th century.
And looking at it through a different lens surely gives you a different perspective.
Looking at it from the beginning, like further back, the relationship with Cuba specifically, it goes back to the Spanish-American War, and it's still, those effects still have, their very strong effects are still in place now today.
Certainly. Now, it sounds like you strive to select topics that you have some prior knowledge on, or do you mostly like to look for things that are entirely foreign to you?
I tend to stick to the topic of Cold War politics, to be honest, but I try to research things I don't know a lot about but want to know more about. So
more of a specialist.
Yeah, I've looked into Haiti, I've looked into Guatemala, I've looked into Iran, I've looked into, not that Haiti has a lot of Cold War politics, but just countries that I don't know a lot about, or their politics and their
Seeing
history.
what impacts they've made or impact that has been made on them throughout that period. Right. So now that you've located your area of interest, kind of selected a topic, is there any specific method you use to develop your research questions, or do you have any research questions that you've already kind of have in mind?
I have a very general research question, and it's just, what is the relationship between Cuba and the Soviet Union look like? And that tends to be a result of what the relationship between the U.S. and Cuba looked like. And I'm thinking that my best route is going to be, because I haven't done too much writing of a thesis yet, but I'm guessing it's going to end up being comparing something, whether it be the economic status, the quality of life, or things like that in Cuba from when they were more reliant and close to the United States versus when they were more reliant and close to the Soviet Union. What is the quality of life for Cubans like under the reliance on the United States versus the USSR? How does that affect their political ideologies of the whole country? Were people, what groups of people supported which countries that were more influential in Cuba, things like that.
So now that you've kind of got an idea of where you want to take your research, you have a few questions in mind, you have your topic, have you stumbled into any sources?
Yes, I have stumbled into some sources. The way I go about it, because I know that I'm going to spend the first part of my paper writing a historiography or historiographical section, my process tends to be looking at secondary and then from there go to primary sources, but specifically I go look at secondary sources, what year they were published, and I try to get some sources from each decade or as close to each decade. I have sources from the 50s, 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and then I have a jump into the early 2000s and then the 2010s. So I'm planning to try and find at least one more source from the 1990s, but I feel like that would be make it easier to write a historiographical section because I can kind of try and pick apart what the author's intentions are, their biases, where they're from, where is this author from. One of my sources is from the University of Guam. So they have a very specific perspective on America, especially, American imperialism that they might have in comparison to some American author from the 1950s.
Right. And it's mostly like, you find a really good book, right? And then kind of go to the back and see what sources they're using, where they pulling their information from. And it kind of allows you to walk back in time and see the different perspectives that are being offered.
Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you for your time, Kayla, and
Thank
best
you.
of luck in the rest of your research.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you. And next we have,
Bryce Nixich.
welcome, Bryce.
Thank you for having me.
Once again, our episode is revolving around research and research methodology. We have an extremely important capstone project to complete. How far along in this research process are you?
I'm actually quite happy with the progress that I've made so far. I have about 16 sources, and my topic is about the Zaibatsu, and I'm leaning towards the history of the Zaibatsu, impact of it politically, economically, and in wartime efforts from the Meiji Restoration to the end of World War II. So having 16 sources so far is a good it's a good stepping stone. I'm looking for more because I haven't looked through these sources yet, and majority of the time, about half of the sources you get, you don't end up using. So far, I would say I am happy where I'm at.
And for those who might be unfamiliar, what exactly is the Zaibatsu? Can you elaborate on that?
Oh, yeah. It's basically companies or monopolies within Japan that control a lot of industry. Industry can be anything, like it could be mining, manufacturing. It's basically a corporation that runs monopolies.
And does this span a specific time period, or are there any specific people involved that you've kind of looked into throughout your research thus far?
I forgot the names of them, but there's two on the War Cabinet who were presidents of these corporations. So it shows you how impactful these people were when it came to manufacturing industrial goods. And the history of it, it started shortly after the Meiji Restoration, when industry started to flourish and government spending on private sector increased quite drastically, and quite the opposite of nationalization. They gave away nationalized buildings to private companies, which is very unique for that type of government structure.
And it sounds like you're already familiar with Japanese history to some degree. Have you studied the Zaibatsu before a little bit, or is this something that is totally new to you?
Completely new. It's something I'm a little afraid of to get into because it's so deep. Like I said earlier, politically as well. It's like a can of jar. It's a can of like worms I'm about to open, man. It's such an immense project I'm taking on here to learn more about the Zaibatsu and the impact they have, and even culturally as well. I mean, most factory workers were under these, companies, and a little fun fact is most factories were, quote unquote factories, were like 2 to 4 people working at a time. It wasn't made like major like in the United States. So,
and being that this is such a grand topic, How have you developed your research questions? I'm sure you have so many that are kind of bouncing around the brain. Is there anything specific that you want to address?
Yeah, I want to focus on the wartime industries through the Sino-Japanese War, the Russo-Japanese War, and then World War One and World War Two, and also the interwar as well, because it's, they're building up for the second Sino-Japanese War. So I truly am. I don't want to dominate my paper with wartime industry, but that is one of the three major focuses, and that's where my questions are leading me.
Fascinating. Now, during this research process, you mentioned that you have 16 sources already. How did you go about finding these sources? Is there any specific method to the madness?
Yeah, Dr. Connolly, a professor here, he told us about a AI called Consensus AI, and it's a research-based AI. It doesn't write things for you. It doesn't do that, but it searches all databases regarding any topic. So when I search up Zaibatsu or the history of Zaibatsu or wartime Zaibatsu, thousands of sources come up from different, different websites, different research institutes, and also different continents. There's translated Japanese work out there for me that is making it my research level to a different level, and it's really bringing me up there when it comes to that.
It makes the topic a little more accessible.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just, from their point of view as well, it's very important to have that.
100%. Now, if there was one thing that you could leave our listeners with today about the Zaibatsu, what you've learned so far, what might that be?
They still dominate to this day, even post-war. Even in the 80s, they were one of the biggest things in the world. They were buying U.S. car manufacturers out. Zaibatsu is, even to this day, is still a major player in the world, and they have not changed since the Meiji Restoration.
Fascinating. Well, thank you for your time, Bryce. That is beautiful, and good luck on the rest of your research.
Thank you.
And next, on the Reluctant Historian podcast, we have our guest.
Maddie Kazakaviches.
Welcome, Maddie. So, how far along are you in your research?
I'm pretty far along. I've done a couple different research paths so far, and I feel like I have a good basis starting point for my paper.
And do you have any specific method to your madness and how you go about finding your topic or at least your area of interest?
I love JSTOR. I will just type up my topic in JSTOR and kind of read through everything that's offered on there and just go from there, really.
And your topic is?
My topic is the PR cover-up Japan faced post-World War II.
And so specific. Why did you choose that?
I just find it really interesting how Japan could commit such horrific crimes during World War II, and they've kind of been forgotten through history. Really now, Japan's seen as like quiet culture and, a powerhouse, but I just want to figure out how they were able to do that where other countries failed and couldn't even really try to begin with.
So given that it's a topic that many might be unfamiliar with, you want to elaborate a little bit on what exactly you might be studying?
Well, my focus right now is just looking at what Japan actually did during World War II. So looking at Korea and China and just seeing how Japan played in World War II. And then looking at the Allied forces coming in post-World War II and their occupation of the country and how that kind of shaped how Japan is today and how we see it today. It's really...
Is there anything you've stumbled into thus far as you've been doing your research?
The rape of Nanjing is a major thing, just to see how horrific Japan really was during the war. And then Comfort Woman from Korea also are just major points that I feel like not a lot of people learn or know about, and that I had never learned or known about. So just seeing that has been really eye-opening in itself.
Fascinating. Are you already familiar with Japanese culture and history, or is this something entirely new to you that was just... You woke up one morning and you're like, I want to study Japanese history.
So I had actually never really focused at all on Japanese history. I was mostly a European historian. But last semester I took Modern Asia with Professor Heisel, and we learned about a few things. And it just really interested me because I had never learned about it, in high school or middle school. So just to see that history that I'd never really come into contact with was really interesting for me.
Well, I mean, he can make watching paint dry fast.
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah.
Now, After you've chosen your topic, it sounds like you might have some research questions already developed. Do you have anything specific, or at least kind of just the method that you use in terms of developing the questions?
Well, I will say last semester for that Modern Asia class, we had a paper and I wrote about 10 pages on a very similar topic, and I just felt like I could talk so much more about it, and there was still so many questions that I had and so much research that I wanted to do. So that's really where I took my inspiration from, just that paper that I already done and kind of manipulating it and putting more into it, because that was only a 10-page paper and now it's 25, so I have a lot more space to learn a lot more.
Right, use that as the jumping point, kind of expand the research that you've had before. That's beautiful. Now, do you have any sources already, or?
I have a couple sources. I still have to do a lot more of just nitpicking through what I have to find my specific things that I actually want to use. But really, I'm focusing on finding more Korean, Chinese historians and their documentations of events and what took place, because they're a little bit uncensored. They're biased, but they're a little less censored. So just looking at those things right now is what I'm focusing on.
In what ways are they uncensored, and what have you found so far?
I have found that a lot of Japanese documents kind of rewrite history a little bit. Like I said, the rape of Nanjing, very horrific, awful event. They call it, I believe, the incident in Nanjing. So just like very much giving it a much softer history than what's actually true. So I've found, and also American documents kind of do the same thing, which is odd. So I've just found that looking at Korean and Chinese documents have been a lot more useful and true to the facts.
And is there one useful and truth-telling fact that you would want to leave our listeners with today?
Ooh, that's a big question. I really think I have to do more research before I set that in stone. But I think just looking into these things and kind of digging past the face value of it is the most useful piece of information I can give. And yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Maddie.
Thank
and
you.
Best of luck on the rest of your research.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
And that's it for this week's episode. Stay tuned for further episodes.